Hi, and welcome to this episode of Tackling Your Taxes, gearing up for the 2025 tax filing season. My name is Aisha Servaty, and I am the Clinic Director of Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid's Low Income Taxpayer Clinic, where we provide representation and advice to taxpayers across the state of Minnesota on their IRS dispute issues. So, a quick overview of what we'll be covering is tips for preparing to file a tax return, getting help after you file a tax return, and then some helpful resources. I will note just on the off the bat that it is called the 2025 filing season because it's happening in 2025 where you are filing a 2024 tax return. So it can get a little bit confusing, but just to know that you'll be filing your 2024 tax return. So what happens through the end of this year, you'll be filing that next year. So, some tips for preparing to file a tax return. I first want to mention records. So, W 2 and 1099, some of those employment forms, will be issued by January 31st, 2025. So, you want to keep these records for when you file your tax return, along with any receipts, bank statements, and other records related to your tax return. And so, your tax preparer, whether you do it yourself or you go to someone, you'll want to have all those records available so that they can input the correct information on the tax return. And then you want to keep those records for at least 3 years because the IRS has 3 years to go and audit your tax return. So you want to make sure you keep everything together in a safe place so that you can reference it when you do file your tax return and then afterwards. The filing deadline for 2024 tax return filing for both federal and state is April 15th, 2025. If you owe taxes and you file and pay after this deadline, just know that additional penalties and interest will be added to the amount that you owe. So you do have the option to make a payment with your tax return, or, this is saying that if you don't pay by April 15th, there will be interest and penalties assessed, and then they'll continue to accumulate until you pay the amount that you owe. There is free filing assistance for taxpayers who are eligible. Both the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, and the Minnesota Department of Revenue, MNDOR, offer resources to help taxpayers find free filing assistance. Those websites and phone numbers will be active by the end of January 2025. And so you'll want to make sure that you check the Internal Revenue Service website, which for a volunteer income tax assistance site or a tax counseling for the elderly site. You can also go, and this is usually the quickest way I recommend for people, is going to the Minnesota Department of Revenue website, which is revenue.state.mn.us. You just type in the search box free tax preparation, and it'll bring you to a database where you can enter your zip code or city or county, any language needs that you might have, and they will come up with the free tax preparation sites in your area or those that meet your search requirement. And so you want to make sure that, again, that service should be available by the end of January, beginning of February at the latest, since tax filing does start at the end of January. And there usually are sites throughout the state of Minnesota. And so regardless of where you live, there should be somewhere near you a free tax assistance filing site. Some additional tips are finding a tax preparer. And so, if you do choose to pay a tax professional to assist you with your taxes, you want to make sure that you find a reputable tax preparer. And you want to remember to never sign a tax return that is blank or incorrect, because you are held liable for what is on the tax return, even if you don't prepare it yourself. And to make sure that your preparer has the proper credentials to prepare taxes. And so they might have received some training. They should have what's called a PTIN, and they want to make sure that they include their information as the one who filled out the tax return for you at the end of the tax return. An additional factor I want to bring up is identity protection, because there are a lot of cases of identity theft during the tax filing season, where someone might take your social security number, name, different information, and file a tax return using that information fraudulently. Or they might, steal and use your information for unemployment benefits or for other employment. So there's a lot of different ways where an individual's identity can be stolen. And so you can request an identity protection personal identification number, an IP PIN, from the IRS if you are concerned about identity theft. And you can do that ahead of time. And what happens when you enroll in that is you receive a new IP PIN at the end of January, usually by the end of January, every year, that you have to use on your return in order for it to be accepted and processed. So that makes it so that if someone doesn't have that IP PIN, then they're unable to file a tax return. And you can request the number from the Internal Revenue Service. If you just type in IP PIN on irs.gov, it'll bring you to more information about that. Or you can search for identity theft or identity protection. And you can request them mid-January through mid-November. So we did kind of just pass the deadline if you wanted an IP PIN for this next tax filing season, but you can apply for one next year so that you can have it for the following tax filing season. And generally, if you're signing up for the number, the IP PIN, then you need that for filing your tax return, and you'll usually need an IRS ID.me online account. And through that online account is where they will put a letter with your IP PIN. So you don't generally anymore receive the IP PIN letter in the mail. It should be uploaded to your IRS online account. So that's how you would gain that information. As I was just talking about, an IRS online account. So we recommend that everyone create an IRS online account. You can go to irs.gov. It's right on the homepage, setting up an IRS online account. And through an online account, you can access your tax records, make or review payment plans, and view account balances that you may owe. You'll also if the IRS issues certain letters and notices to you, copies of those will be in your IRS online account in case for some reason you don't receive them in the mail, or you had received it but you're unable to find it. And it's fairly easy to create an IRS online account. You do have to verify your identity through a series of providing like your ID, a selfie, different things like that. Or you can talk to someone over the phone through a video message, and they can verify your identity that way. Two other things I want to talk about that are helpful for after you file your tax return is going to a taxpayer assistance center, where they offer in-person help by appointment. So you can call 844-545-5640 to set up an appointment. And there are 6 taxpayer assistance centers in Minnesota. They are located in Bloomington, Duluth, Mankato, Rochester, St. Cloud, and St. Paul. So if you just go to irs.gov and search taxpayer assistance centers, you can find out more information about those. You can go to a taxpayer assistance center and make payments. If you owe the IRS, you can find out information about the status of any tax refunds, if it has been more than a certain time period. There are a plethora of resources that the taxpayer assistance centers can access and help you with. There's also the Taxpayer Advocate Service, and then on the Minnesota side of things, the Minnesota Taxpayer Rights Advocate. And so the Taxpayer Advocate Service assists with federal tax issues, and then the state of Minnesota's Taxpayer Rights Advocate helps with state tax issues. So if you're experiencing financial difficulty, immediate threat of action by either tax agency, or a delay with the IRS or state of Minnesota, you can contact those offices directly and request their assistance. For the Taxpayer Advocate Service, if you call their phone number, again, if you just search Taxpayer Advocate Service, that will come up. There is an office in Minnesota in St. Paul, but you would fill out an IRS Form 911, and then you can mail that or fax that into the Taxpayer Advocate Service, and then they'll contact you within usually within 2 to 3 weeks. You'll get contacted, and then they'll work out a plan for assisting you. The state of Minnesota Taxpayer Rights Advocate, you can call, email, or there is an online form that you can fill out and ask for assistance. I do want to mention some translation and accessibility resources that are available. The IRS provides resources in 20 different languages on the IRS website, and then the Minnesota Department of Revenue offers tax resources in Spanish, Somali, and Hmong on its website. There's also the IRS provides accessible resources like Braille, large print, audio, and electronic formats. And you can call the IRS Accessibility Hotline at 833-690-0598. And the Minnesota Department of Revenue has similar resources available on their website. Again, that's revenue.state.mn.us. And if you just search accessibility, then you'll be able to come up with those resources. One thing I do want to note is that if you owe taxes for a prior tax year, the IRS or Minnesota Department of Revenue may offset your expected tax refund to pay those prior year taxes. So what that means is, if, for example, you owe $1,000 for tax year 2023, and you haven't paid it, that's the total amount, including interest and penalties. And so if you are anticipating getting a refund on your 2024 tax return of maybe $2,000, then the refund will first go to that prior tax year. So it'll go to that 2023 tax debt, pay it off, and then you would receive the difference and get a refund of $1,000 instead of $2,000. And so that's kind of how that works with both the IRS and the state of Minnesota. And the state of Minnesota can let you know, if you owe a debt with them, they can go after your federal tax refund. If you maybe don't owe something with the federal government, but you do owe it with the state government. So if you know that you have a prior issue, or if you discover one when you file or you don't receive a refund, you can contact us at the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic to see if we're able to assist you. So I just want to provide a little bit of information about the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic and what we do. We advocate for, advise, and educate low-income and ESL taxpayers across the entire state of Minnesota. So our office is located centrally in Minneapolis, Minnesota, but we do help taxpayers throughout the entire state. And MMLA also has offices in St. Cloud and Wilmer that we do travel to occasionally and provide in-person services there. We represent Minnesota taxpayers whose income does not exceed 250% of the federal poverty guidelines. So that means what we can do is we can contact the IRS on your behalf. We can fill out forms on your behalf. We can go to U.S. tax court, different things like that, and represent you in those proceedings. If you are over 250%, we can advise you and give it on your tax issue, regardless of your income. And we assist Minnesota taxpayers with IRS tax disputes of a plethora of different topics, but we do U.S. tax court representation, tax settlements, and payment plan agreements, preventing or stopping garnishment due to a financial hardship, and then disputing tax audits. Those are just some of the issues that we cover. But again, if it's an IRS dispute, so if you've received a notice from the IRS and they either froze your refund, applied your refund to a different debt, or are assessing you a liability, that's something that we can help with. Our focus is on the Internal Revenue Service. We're actually funded by a grant in part that is offered through the Internal Revenue Service. We can offer assistance with state of Minnesota issues for the same tax year and issue as a federal tax issue. So if you happen to be audited for tax year 2022 by the IRS and the Minnesota Department of Revenue, we may be able to assist with both of those. Some resources. You can call Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid's intake at 612-334-5970, and we can offer assistance and see if your case is one that we can assist with. The LITC does not prepare tax returns. So again, you can find more information about a volunteer income tax assistance, a VITA site at irs.gov/VITA, or you can go to that Minnesota Department of Revenue website at revenue.state.mn.us, type in free tax preparation, and then you'll get more information that way. Then there's a variety of kind of multi-page resources on different legal issues, including tax issues, on Law Help MN. So you can go to lawhelpmn.org and find out more information about a variety of different legal issues that you might have. So that is this episode of Taxing Your Taxes on gearing up for the 2025 tax filing season, where you will be filing your 2024 tax return. This will be the last Tackling Your Taxes Facebook Live and YouTube Live episode for this year, but we will be returning in January with a new series of webinars focusing on new tax issues that will be facing low income and ESL taxpayers. And so please look out for that. We'll be starting about mid to the end of January and go through May. So again, if you have any questions or have a tax legal issue, you can call our intake at 612-334-5970, and we'd be happy to talk through your tax issue and see if we're able to assist. Thank you and have a great day.